A very warm welcome, dear students. Let's begin. The Indian Contract Act 1872. The contract is the foundation of the civilized world. The reason being, we make certain promises, and promises should be kept. That is the foundation of the civilized world. Today, we will understand how promises becomes the foundation of a civilized world wherein the promises which we make becomes agreements, and those agreements which are enforceable by law becomes contract. A civilized world is a world where promises are kept. In jungle, the lion might not promise another animal because they follow their instincts. But civilized world, once we make a promise, we abide by it. In CA Foundation, we need to deal with section 1 to section 75. In intermediate, we will deal with 124 to section 238. But most likely, the foundation syllabus is going to change, and these sections might be included soon in CA Foundation. We live in a business environment and we incur innumerable contracts. These contracts defines the rights and duties in a business transaction, and business is governing the society. The modern society is highly dependent on business environment, and law will protect or enforce the rights and duties. So jumping straight into what is a contract. But before that, we should understand promise. Section 2b defines promise as when the person to whom the proposal is made signifies his assent thereto. Assent means yes, and this yes should be free. Free means free consent. Now, what do we mean by free consent? No pressure. The proposal is said to be accepted when you say yes. Proposal when accepted becomes a promise. This definition is the foundation for contract. So let's examine the following points emerge from the above definition. When the person to whom the proposal is made, A is making proposal to B. So whom the proposal is made? Mr. B. Mr. B signifies his assent on that proposal which is made to him. So Mr. B says yes. The proposal becomes accepted. Accepted proposal becomes promise. So a certain promise has been made from B to A. And how this promise has come into effect? Because he said yes. Thus, we say that an agreement is the result of the proposal made by one party to the other party, and that the other party gives his acceptance thereto, of course, for mutual consideration. Mutual consideration is very important. Both the parties have given certain promises to each other and some value. This mutual consideration means some proper value should be delivered to both. So once the proposal is accepted, it gives rise to an agreement. So promises are nothing but merely agreements. But can we say that this agreement is a contract? No. An agreement becomes contract when it is enforceable by law. So we need to check whether the judiciary the judiciary is happy with this agreement. The judiciary will happily enforce. The judiciary will support. Will a judiciary support an agreement between two parties for murder? Of course not. So we need to examine. We need to examine the various situations. The term contract, defined under Section 2H of the Indian Contract Act 1872, says contract is an agreement enforceable by law. So, two essential elements: an agreement and its enforceability by law. Its enforceability means enforceability of the agreement. How this agreement came? By mutual promises. So, mutual promises for mutual consideration. So, I think we are more or less sure about promise. What do we mean by enforceability by law? An agreement to become a contract must give rise to a legal obligation. Legal obligation. Basically, obligation means a duty. Here, the duty is bound legally. Law will enforce you to perform the duty. That means legal obligation. I promise my son to buy him a bicycle. Will it amount to a legal obligation? No. So, this promise will not be called a contract. But my son will say, Papa, you agreed. There was an agreement between us, Papa. Yes, we call such agreements as social agreements. So, social agreements are not enforceable by law, which means agreement between husbands and wife. So, they are social agreements. Did they intend to create a legal relationship? Did they intend to create a legal obligation? Husband and wife, a general agreement. Darling, today evening we go and watch Bahubali, and the husband fails to turn up. No legal obligation was there. So we can conclude that contract comprises of an agreement which is a promise or a set of reciprocal promises. Set means generally two. We got two parties in a contract. Both parties deliver or promise each other. So it becomes a set of reciprocal promises. A promised B and B promised A. So this becomes reciprocal promises or a set of reciprocal promises. So the contract comprises of an agreement. Agreement was made because there were mutual promises, reciprocal promises, and promise is basically the acceptance of a proposal giving rise to a binding contract. Binding means you are bound by it. Now you are bound by the promise. You need to fulfill. You need to fulfill the obligation. You need to fulfill the promise. So basically, promise becomes the obligation. Once I am obliged, if it is under my obligation to perform something, my obligation becomes the right of the other person. The other party gets the right that I need to perform my obligation. So this happens for both the parties. My obligation is right of A, and A's obligation will be right of B if A and B are the parties to the contract. So kindly read example 1, example 2. I'm very sure you will find them very easy. An obligation to maintain wife and children. Do you think such an obligation of maintaining wife and children, is it covered under the scope of contract? No. Why? Because these are status obligations. Such an obligation or duty has come into effect by becoming husband. So your status is husband. So dear husband, you please take care of your wife and children. And this is not under any obligation of Contract Act. So this is status obligation. So I think we should stop today. Please try to read each word of ICAI study module. I have given you a brief explanation and that should be sufficient. Next day we start the difference. Thank you so much.